Well, hello. Welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Stu Nunnery is an American writer, composer, musician, recording artist, actor, and activist. In the early 70s, Stu released a self-titled solo album in 1973. A couple of tracks, Madelaine and Sally from Syracuse, also released as singles, charted in the US. In 1974, the single Lady It's Time to Go became #1 in Brazil. In the mid-70s, Stu began a prolific career in the jingle advertising business, working on several national advertising campaigns. Between 1978 and 1981, Stu suffered a hearing loss and partial loss of sight that would sideline him in the music industry for more than 35 years. Mr. Nunnery would return to the entertainment industry, appearing in commercials and feature films. In 2015, aided by his audiologist, the latest technology and vocal and auditory training, Stu returned to his passion, music. In recent years, Stu has been quite active in speaking and writing about his experiences with hearing loss and bringing more needed attention to hearing problems. Today, my guest is still writing and has finished a screenplay about his life in and out of music and is currently working on a memoir. Well, welcome, Stu.
Thank you, Craig, and it was a great introduction. I haven't heard that in a long time.
Okay. Well,
That's
thank
right.
you for being for being
That's
here,
right.
and well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
Oh, I was born in Mineola, New York, on Long Island, and raised in Garden City, New York.
Early on, let me ask you, early on, do you remember hearing music in the household?
When I was young,
Yes.
oh, music was always my love, and I played the piano. Started playing the piano when I was 4.
Okay.
And by the time I was 4, I was able to play the Tennessee Waltz on the black keys with both hands for my mother. And that was
Okay.
really the start of my entertainment career, because she was the one that turned me on to the music of the 40s and the 50s. And I became a real aficionado of that stuff and would mimic it on the piano. So I've been listening and playing and performing music since 4.
Since 4. So your mother played music as well. You got the gene from your mother?
My mother took piano lessons as a young girl, but never stayed with it.
Okay.
So she would do what I wound up doing, which was playing by ear, ironically, playing by ear and playing the songs from the wartime era that she loved. And I remember her mostly playing at parties after she had been celebrating a little too much. And she'd sit down at the piano and play some of the wonderful songs from the 30s and the 40s. And it was a real entertainment for me that she did that. And I enjoyed it and thought that it was a great way to make friends too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, can you remember, did you start collecting records or 45s when you were younger?
Well, I remember when I was young, before I was 10, listening to the radio a lot and loving some of the music that I was hearing. And occasionally I would buy a 45. And I don't remember us having a big collection of 45s. I listened to the radio, and anything that was upbeat. I love novelty songs, which I wound up writing myself. And it was all pretty much the same to me, but I don't remember having a large collection of 45s. Okay.
You know what, speaking of novelty, do you know what my first album I ever bought was the Royal Guardsman? Do you remember the Royal Guardsman?
I do remember the Royal Guardsman, yes.
Snoopy
Were you
versus
in that group?
No, but I bought that album. That was my first album. First album was Snoopy versus the Red Baron. Yeah.
I loved people like Frank Ifield, who did I Remember You with a yodel. And as I said, novelty songs and anything that was upbeat and fun. I loved show music.
Right.
And my mother would play some of that too. And that became my repertoire early on. I took piano lessons from the time I was about 7 or 8 and hated them. because I didn't want the discipline of having to read music. Hell, I could play both hands, anything that I wanted to.
Right.
So I would have my mother go to the music store and buy sheet music for a song that I loved. And I would bring it home, and I wouldn't read the sheet music. I would look at the lyrics because I already knew how to play the song. And I would use that to sing. Now, just a quick anecdote. My father walked in on a music lesson that I was having at home one day when I was about 10 or 11. And the music teacher was screaming at me because I wouldn't read sheet music. And my father said, "What's the matter?" And this gentleman said, "He's being a rugged individual." My father said, "I like him that way. You're fired." So,
Okay.
So there was no discouragement for me from being a freelancer.
Good deal. Well, it was great that your parents were both encouraging like that. That's great.
Very much so. Very much
That's
so.
great. That's great. Well, talk about, as a teenager, some of the bands or musicians that you were getting into.
You know, it's funny. I didn't think about musicians and arrangements as much when I was a teenager. I remember slow dancing to Johnny Mathis and a few others, parties and that type of stuff. What was happening is once I got to high school, and I was 14 in high school, I started playing the guitar. I got my first guitar, and there were hootenannies. So I would play at talent shows and hootenannies, and usually do pretty well. I was also in the Glee Club in high school, and sang tenor and sang solos at Christmas time. And really, I remember more just hanging out with a friend of mine, and he and I both having gotten guitars, playing Simon and Garfunkel and the artists that we loved back in that time. A lot of it had to do with the fact who was playing the instrument that I was playing. And it was guitar, so whoever it was. I love the Kingston Trio and several others too, but it was who's playing the instrument that I play and how are they doing that?
Right, right. So you were into the early folk music, folk scene. Yeah.
Definitely. And, you know, it was the perfect time. It was the 60s and Peter, Paul and Mary, but the sophistication of Simon and Garfunkel hit me and my friend Ed Murphy, and we hung out and did a lot of things together musically. And we brought guitar masses to our Catholic high school. So we loved playing guitar masses on Friday mornings. And we would play things like Michael Rode the Boat Ashore and everything that folkies were singing back in those days, Kumbaya. And occasionally we would slip in one of our favorite songs. Back in those days, nobody complained very much as long as it was making people feel good. So guitar masses, and then I was playing at some weddings and a few other things. And my musical interest became broader, and but it wasn't until a while later that I thought of becoming a musician and a recording artist.
Okay. Well, was there a music scene developing around you at that time?
Yeah, it was, you know, but it was kind of internal. I can't say that I had anything formal. I never thought, well, I'm going to be a musician for my life. Yeah. And having worked with some of the greatest session musicians who had been playing since they were 5, and wanted to be a musician their whole life. I wasn't that. I went to school at Princeton. I didn't know what I was going to do after Princeton, but I had a Princeton degree, which was supposed to mean something. And I did a lot of performing and singing in college. But again, right up until the end of college, I never thought about a career in music.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you weren't a member of any band? You just played solo?
The only band I was a part of was a trio that my younger brother and I and a friend of ours put together. And during the summers while I was in college, we would play at a couple of clubs. Okay. And but that was it. And I would play piano and guitar. My brother would play piano and organ. And then we had Ed played drums. And we had a nice trio, but I never thought of being in other bands.
Okay. Okay. How about how long had you been writing songs prior to your first album?
When I was pretty young, I would mimic the novelty songs that I heard on the radio and change the words to reflect the people in my family. And so when the family got together for an event, Stuart would sing some funny song that he switched the words with. And that was really the first thing that I did creatively, was just steal the music and the melody and put in my own lyrics. I didn't start to get serious until I had left college and moved to the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts and started performing at the Red Lion Inn, which is historic. And it was just at the moment when folk was turning into rock. I was in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where Arlo Guthrie was, and all the artists and musicians who were traveled to the East Coast went through Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and the Red Lion Inn, where I was performing between 1971 and 73. And then I started to get serious because my colleagues who were also playing at the hotel on the weekends or during the week were writing their own songs. And I thought, yeah, maybe it's time to do that. One of my icons and one of my inspirations is Gordon Lightfoot. And his music from the 70s through the mid 70s were all on the charts. I loved his music. I wanted to be like him. And so I began writing more seriously. And in 1973, I went into a recording studio in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and put a demo together. I got the demo to New York, and a recording contract was offered to me soon after. So then I became very serious about writing music, but it really started in the Berkshires after college.
After college. Well, the first time that when you went into the recording studio to do the demo was, what was that experience? What was that experience like?
It was a demo, and it wasn't the first time I was in a recording studio making a demo, but it was the first time I was in a studio making a serious demo. And I brought in a couple of other musicians. We did 6 or 7 songs. And then the trick was to get it to New York and somebody to listen to it. And I have a story with that too. And my great-grandfather was one of the pioneers of the record sleeve business. And he started a company called Preston Leroy Andrews and Company. And they put in the machinery to create 7 and 12-inch record sleeves that went on 45s and 33s. My dad married into the company, and one of his clients was Lauren Becker, who was a well-known singer during the 40s and 50s, who started a rock and roll label called Evolution Records. And he was buying record sleeves from the company. So my dad passed him the demo tape that I made. And maybe a week or 2 later, I got a call from Lauren Becker, who wanted to meet. We got together in New York, and he offered me a contract to create my first album.
Is that right? Oh, that's how that happened. Okay. Yeah.
So you had a nepotistic. It's a little nepotistic, but it works, you know.
It does work, the connection there.
That's right.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, the actual album that you recorded. Do you recall that recording session?
Oh, I remember all my recording sessions. And first of all, I was given a producer, Al Gorgoni, who at the time was a very well-known session musician. He was the one that came up with the musical riff on Sounds of Silence when the Simon & Garfunkel brought in an electric guitar. We had that little arpeggio that he plays up front, and that was Al Gorgoni. And Al played on a lot of hits as well. So he liked the music. We got together, went into the studio, and right away I became part of the brotherhood of these wonderful musicians who came in. So Al didn't scrimp, the company didn't scrimp, and I had the best of the best the very first time out of the box. And I don't know whether you remember names, you probably do, but Elliot Randall, who was the Reelin' in the Years, Stu Woods, Rick Marotta on drums, David Spinoza, it's there somewhere, I'll come up with it, but just the best studio musicians at the time, all in their early 20s. And I was 23 at the time. And it was magical. And Paul Griffin on arrangements, and it was great. So I did all the vocals, I played acoustic guitar, and then we had the other musicians playing as well. No, I'll never forget that session.
Yeah. You know, the album fits very nicely into that singer-songwriter era of the early 70s. Really nicely.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
As mentioned in the intro, Madelaine and Sally from Syracuse did quite well.
Well,
Both,
what happened was one of the reasons I was signed to the label in the first place was a novelty song called Sally from Syracuse.
Yeah.
And so that was going to be the first single. It went out ahead, and very quickly, obviously, Syracuse picked it up. And for all of 1974, it was the #1 record in Syracuse. It also hit the charts, and mostly Cashbox and Record World at the time, and made it to number 68 on the charts and in Record World and Cashbox. And then Madelaine, which got very good reviews, it's a very pretty ballad, was released secondly, and didn't do as well as the others. It got inside the top 100 on Billboard, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned, I won't preempt your question, but Lady, It's Time to Go was another ballad that I had written. And I have no idea how this happened, but in 1974, I received a call from RCA Records in New York. And the gentleman on the phone said, "Do you know that you're a big star in Brazil?" I said, "No, I had no idea." He said, "Yes, can you come to New York?" Yeah. So I went to New York, and all these gentlemen from Latin American countries were there. And RCA had a private label in Brazil called Copacabana Records. And for some reason, I don't know why, they released Lady, It's Time to Go. And it became the #1 record in Brazil for a time. And when I met everybody in New York, they said, "We need you to go to Brazil and perform and help us sell this record and build your career." Now, I was 23, 24 at the time. I had no management. The company I was with was about to go out of business. There was just nothing there for me to hold on to and take to Brazil. So I never made it to Brazil. To this day, never made it to Brazil. So the record took off for years. It became the theme for Brazil's #1 soap opera, and just continued. I heard nothing after a while. In 2014, 40 years later, yes, 40 years later, another phone call tells me that the editor of a magazine called VIP, which is VP, it's a trend magazine, a men's magazine. He said, "We'd like to do a feature story on you and Lady, It's Time to Go." Now, this is 40 years later. So they did a wonderful story. It was printed in VP, and they told some of the story, most of it correct, about what had happened to me. But they mentioned my record was such a cultural watershed for them, and such an important moment, that they wanted to honor that, and they did for me, which was a wonderful thing. Since that time, I'm very good, close friends with the former editor of that magazine, and I still get fan mail from people in Brazil.
In Brazil,
my Facebook page is filled with people from Brazil, and it's the tragedy of my life that I never got down there to perform.
Yeah. Isn't that something, how a song can become #1 in another country, like that, and just out of the blue? I mean, they like it. They like something about the song, and it just appeals to them. Yeah.
That's correct. It's something I learned. And during the time that my record came out, there were several artists, either American artists or Brazilian artists, that were trying to tap into the American sensibility about music. Yeah. And so there was a lot of English-speaking records on the charts. I remember seeing everybody on the charts. Yeah. And there was just great interest in American music. And the other thing is that Brazilians love to dance. Yeah. And whether it's Saturday or Sunday during the day, they'll meet in the plaza and dance. And my song became one of their favorite songs to dance to. And so, yeah, you're right. You can't tell what's going to hit or why it's going to hit. But mine did. Mine did. And it's a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah. And adding on to that story, the magazine called you the Brazilian Sugar Man after Sixto Rodriguez. And his documentary. Yeah.
In 2014, no, I'm sorry, probably about 2012, Sixto Rodriguez from Detroit
Yeah.
was discovered again after an album he put out that was loved crazily in South Africa.
Yeah.
But he was invisible.
Right.
Two guys, I don't know where they were from, I don't remember, found him.
Yeah.
And let him know that his music was a hit down in South Africa. Took him down there to perform 40 years later. And he was a huge hit down there as well. He was a bricklayer.
Yeah.
And so didn't have a sexy musical life. But they created a documentary around him, which won the Academy Award.
Right.
Now, what VP Magazine said about me was that I'm another artist who had hits in a foreign country that was invisible and was discovered. So they said the similarities were there, and I agreed. Now, nobody's done a documentary yet on me that's won an Academy Award, but we're hoping that happens at some point.
Right. Hey, maybe this is the start of it right here. Yeah, this could be a start. There you go. There you go, Stu. Well, going back, I wanted to mention, going back to the album, a couple of other songs that I liked off of there. First of all, I wanted to say Madelaine, the piano intro, it reminds me of the theme from Hill Street Blues.
Well, that's interesting. I can't say that there isn't anything that I have written that didn't have pieces of other things. Now, Elton John was another major influence on me.
Right.
And I think I decided to become a piano playing songwriter when I heard your song.
Oh,
and your song changed the game for me. And I said, I can do that.
Right.
And Madelaine is your song.
Yes. And you know, at times your voice even sounds a little similar to Elton, you know, in some of your songs.
Yes.
You can hear that a little bit. A really nice album. The whole album is really nice. I'm surprised it didn't do better. I also like, and that's fine with me.
Is that one of your favorites?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's my sweetheart's favorite. And
okay.
My sweetheart and I have been together almost 8 years. We met online.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did to seduce her was to turn her on to my music. And she listened to the whole album and said, that's the song I love.
Yeah.
So you two have very good taste.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you know, I collected enough of it, you know, over the years. So, you know, you do something enough, and your taste starts to be honed, just like playing guitar or keyboards. You know, you hone that. Well, another one, Diminished Love is another one that I like.
Diminished Love? Yes.
Yeah, yeah, a really nice track.
That was one of my favorite guitar pieces, and I got a chance to do that with David Spinoza in the studio. And yeah, just magical. And I had enough chops to be able to keep up with him. And it's a lovely tune. It's kind of a very esoteric, strange tune. But when people are reviewing my record, they often say that his stuff is very unique. Yes. Fine with me. That's fine with me, as the song goes. Right. You know? So
that's a compliment. I think that's a compliment.
That's right.
Well,
that's right.
Well, you know, and then one last track that I really enjoy, "The Lady in Waiting." It has that kind of minstrel feel, you know.
It's one of my favorites too, and I have to give Cat Stevens credit. Just the way I love madrigals and I loved harpsichord music. Yes. In fact, while everybody was off doing drugs and things after sessions, I would go home and listen to harpsichord music, which is again a little bizarre, but I would, and I wanted to write a song with the harpsichord in it. Yes. And if you reviewed the lyrics in my first album, you say they're all kind of goodbye songs, and this one especially is that, speaking directly to the woman. You know, you could have done this, but you didn't. You sat on your hands and just let this thing kind of disappear. And right. But the harpsichord is beautiful, and it just fits. It fits me musically.
I love that instrument. I really do. I really do. I wish it was used more often. Why? It's a really nice album. Do you remember at the time any reviews or any kind of fans' reactions?
Well, let's put it this way. Several of the songs on the album became turntable hits around the world. I had music playing in Canada, England, France, Belgium, Scandinavia, South Africa, Australia, all the English-speaking countries, but there's some that were not English-speaking. And it's always gotten good reviews. Al Gorgoni's son, Adam, who's a movie producer in Hollywood and a songwriter, says it's one of his favorite albums that he's ever listened to. I think because it's so different.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily hit any of the lines that music back in that period of the 70s. I mean, being connected to the 70s is probably the greatest compliment I can think of. But there was so much unusual music, so much music that was different. And think of the artists that came out from 68 to 72. Everybody.
Yes.
Joni Mitchell, Carole King, Carly Simon, James Taylor, Elton John, and everybody that fell off that tree.
Right.
So, I was happy to be part of that and very devastated not to be able to do a second album.
Yeah.
I think
why
more than
not?
anything was, what would I have become? What could I have
Right.
done? I'd written a lot of songs for that second album that never got released.
Why didn't it? What happened?
Well, when I lost my hearing between 78 and 80, I couldn't go back into the studio again. The hearing loss devastated my tonal discrimination.
Okay.
So while I was able to sing a cappella in key, I couldn't sing with an instrument. So if we had recorded everything in the studio and I went in to sing, I might not have been able to sing on key.
Okay.
So it didn't. So I've had those songs, but the good news is all those songs, many of those songs have been recorded at different times. Many of them, most of them before I lost my hearing, but were never released.
Okay.
So I have demos, I have recordings that I'm going to release in the next couple of months of all the songs that nobody ever heard before.
Right. Great. That's good news. That's good news,
Yes.
Stu. Yeah. Yes.
I'm excited. And again, I think people will see how eclectic my writing is. People say, were you folk? Were you pop? Were you rock? I said, yes. It's all of those things. And even classical music, you could almost put Lady in Waiting in a classical category. And,
right. Yes,
so,
you could.
Yes,
you could. Well, I wanted to go back. What I was talking about was that period before you started losing your hearing in 78, from like 75 to 77. During that period, why wasn't there a second album before you lost your hearing?
During that period, I would say, well, between 73 and 74 and 75, it was living off the first album. There was no money. I never made any money from that, but it was kind of like living off the promotion and publicity of that and trying to make something go. In 1976, I was signed to CBS Records, Epic, by John Hammond, the impresario, and went into the studio and did 4 songs with great engineer Don Palouse, arrangements by Kenny Asher. And again, CBS didn't release anything. So those 4 songs are there for people to eventually listen to. And I fell into the jingle business. Walking out the door of CBS, I was called to see if I wanted to write radio and television jingles. I did. I made a lot of money and very quickly. And then 1978, I had just written a song for Disney, a parade theme called Main Street USA, which is still a hit song for them.
Popular, yes.
And soon after, I returned home after a recording session in the afternoon, fell asleep, woke up and had an explosion in the left side of my head and took my hearing out on the left side. The next year and a half, I continued singing jingles. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. And by 1981, the right ear, same way as the left ear, the explosion in the right side. Then I was totally gone.
Wow. So it wasn't a gradual thing that happened. It just all of a sudden. Okay.
It's called sudden sensory neural hearing loss.
Okay.
So it was absolutely sudden. And there's a coda here. After I lost the second ear, I was referred to a doctor in New York who put me on corticosteroids and some vitamins, which is much of the regimen that Huey Lewis is going through right now with his Meniere's disease.
Right.
And very quickly, things started to get better. The hearing well, the hearing started to get better. My total discrimination was better. My worst speech discrimination was better. And the tinnitus in the ear was quieting down. The vertigo that I was feeling, the nausea were quieting. And suddenly I decided maybe I can do this again. Even though I had already resigned myself after the second year. That's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I went back into the studio again and recorded 4 more songs that nobody's ever heard. And my band was Paul Schaefer and Will Lee from Letterman and Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Malin, Lawrence Juber from Wings, Alan Schwartzberg. And it was a wonderful group. The tracks are great. Yes. Nobody's ever heard them. So yes. they'll come out as well. But I can't say it was gradual. It was sudden on both cases. Now, if I had been more aware of what hearing loss is or what preempts it, I might have said, yeah, it was gradual.
Yeah.
It was sudden. And it was some kind of weakness too in the architecture of my ears that allowed that to happen.
Well, going back to the jingle writing,
sure.
that proved to be a very lucrative business for a while, like you said. I mean, there was a lot of money to be made doing that.
Did you ever see Mad Men?
Yes.
On television.
Yeah.
Well, the Mad Men agencies that ran the advertising business in New York City.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know, what happens is the Mad Men agencies get a contract from a company like Disney, and Disney says, which they did in 1980, Disneyland's 25th anniversary is coming up in 1980. We'd like to give them a few new songs. So the Mad Men agency, I forget who it was, they would contract several different jingle houses and say, send us some songs.
Yeah.
So the jingle house I was working for was part of that. And I'm walking right down the middle of Main Street, USA, 7 verses in 20 minutes. Disney bought it along with another song, and it was going to be used for their 25th anniversary in 1980. I never heard anything. 1985, I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, having eye surgery. My uncle calls me and says, Marie Osmond and a cast of thousands just sang your song. Oh. So it was finally out. It became, and I was paid $3,500 for the song, total.
Yeah.
And it became a parade theme at all the parks. It's on videos. If you have children, it's on those Disney sing-along videos. And that was it. But the jingle business, there was so much money in advertising.
Yeah.
And as a singer, now as a writer and a singer, I'd get paid for writing a jingle. I get paid for singing the solo, and then I get paid for each repetition of that. So if I sang a double or a triple, I get paid double or triple. One of the things I talk about in my memoir is I had a $12,000 day.
Yeah.
And I went to the mailbox, and there were 15 checks, I guess, from different agencies, and it was $12,000 in my mailbox that day. And this was 1977.
Yeah.
So that was something else. So it was crazy money. And I have friends now. I left the business 2 or 3 years after I started, so I never saw the millions that many of my friends saw. And studio musicians especially talk about that was golden time.
Yes.
There was just studio musicians would play 24 hours a day if they could, because they were playing on different commercials, getting paid for this and that. It was something. And then the singers were singing all these things. And once again, I was in paradise.
Yeah,
right. And it ended very precipitously. So.
Yeah. Well, one I'm sure many of the viewers will remember is I Love New York.
Well, I sang on the I Love New York spots.
Okay, you sang on
that. They were written by Steve Carman, who was a god of jingle writing back in those days. He wrote everything. And I sang Here Comes the Bud. And the I Love New York spots were wonderful. He did thousands of them. And I wrote jingles for cars and trucks, McDonald's, so whatever was happening. And then I think you notice now there are so very few jingles.
Yes.
And singers. And just a quick story. In 1980, the way jingle singers would work is or a jingle would be made, you go into the studio with the basic tracks, drums, guitar, piano, whatever, and they would put that down. And then after that's done, the classical musicians would come in. And back in those days, the Philharmonic players, violinists, violas, bassists, cellists would all come in to do their part. And then we would watch them walk out, and the singers would go in finally to do their part. So it was classic routine, and we would do that all the time. We knew when the classical musicians came out that it was time for us to sing. Well, one day in 1980 or 81, the producer of the jingle called us to come in and sing. And we came in and we heard all this music, the basic tracks, the strings, the horns, you name it. And we looked around and we said, where do they come from? And it pointed to a woman in one of the soundproof booths, and it was a woman named Susan Ciani, who had learned how to program on a computer all the musical and orchestral sounds. Oh. And that was the end of, to a great extent, these musicians playing on jingles, because Susan could do it with one instrument.
Right.
So, you know, we talk about AI today. Well, this is kind of the first phase of AI in musically. And so we knew that we were next, that she would be able to mimic voices and not need us at all. But I had left the business before that happened. And I still have a lot of friends from the jingle business, and I don't hear anybody doing jingles these days.
You're doing, it was sad.
But I was in golden time. I was in golden time, and it was fabulous.
Yeah, how technology started taking people's jobs away from them. Yeah, that started hitting hard. Yeah, and it's still working.
You know where it's most seen now is I think about it. I made a demo after my hearing came back for a short period of time. I went into the studio again with Paul Schaefer and Will Lee and those guys into Media Sound in New York, which is one of the top recording studios, and spent a lot of money, and not only on the musicians but on the technology. Today, somebody can do this in their basement, or you can go anywhere, and you know this. You can go anywhere to get your songs recorded, and then you can use machinery to do the overdubs, strings, horns, whatever else you want. I have friends that do that. They make records in their basement.
Right. You
don't need the big studios anymore, and that's where technology has really changed. And I think it's great because anybody can make music today. Yeah, right. There's the plus side. You're right. There is the positive. Well, talk about how you became involved in feature film work. What I did for 7 years after I left music was get involved in natural foods. Okay. And I was a salesman for a natural food company in the Midwest. My job was to make the East Coast safe for the natural foods that we sold. And I did that for 7 years, did a lot of traveling and a lot of time alone. And then because of my interest in natural foods, which is almost fanatic, by 2002, I had moved to Providence, Rhode Island, and began working with farmers. Okay. And I started an organization called the Rhode Island Center for Agricultural Education and Promotion. And it was ostensibly started to teach kids about agriculture because farmers felt that they were getting older and nobody was going to take over the profession. And I became more interested in agritourism, which was getting people to visit farms, to enjoy activities and see what farming was all about, so that they could support them. But I didn't get involved teaching. I had a teaching certificate when I left Princeton, but I didn't get involved in teaching or working with kids or thinking about music that way. But I was very much out of music at the time and trying to find something that would work. Right. Well, my question was, that's great. I wanted to hear about that too. But my question was about being involved in films like Philadelphia. I'm sorry. That's all right. Yes. That's all right. That's all right. Your audience, if there's anybody in your audience that has hearing problems, they'll understand my challenge at times. Right. All right. In retrospect, I would still be working today if I was not in music but had been in film. Okay. First thing that was I became interested. Well, actually, I was doing commercials in Philadelphia, and I did a couple of on-screen commercials. Through that, I got a part in Age of Innocence with Daniel Day-Lewis and others, which was filmed in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Through that, I got Tom Hanks and Philadelphia, the movie Philadelphia. So I did a lot of extra work. And but I was also studying acting and studying dance. I thought maybe I'd be a triple threat on Broadway. And so when I was still living in New York, I took improvisation. And when I moved to Philadelphia, I was taking scene study and everything else. And as I said, in retrospect, as I sit here today, I would still be working if I were an actor, because it would be much easier. And for a long time with a hearing aid, I felt that I wasn't going to be acceptable on TV until I started seeing hearing aids all over TV and in films.
Right.
So I didn't pursue it much, because much of the time after I lost my hearing was spent trying to have a life. And instead of saying, well, I'm going to give up everything and just do acting, or I'm going to give up everything and do music, I wanted to have a life with somebody, with a partner, and see what I could get. And okay, I'll have a job and make some money, but I don't want to be a fanatic again, as I was with foods for a while. Right. So the film thing was there. I appeared in films. I can point out where I am in certain films, but I wasn't much. I didn't win an Academy Award for extra work. Let's put that in. Though a funny anecdote, I was working with Martin Scorsese on Age of Innocence, and I was dressed in this incredible outfit which came from the Vatican. I was an usher in the Opera House at Philadelphia. So I was standing in line with 4 or 5 other guys, ramrod straight, my hands behind my back, and Daniel Day-Lewis was going to walk right in front of us. And Martin said, now everybody just stand there while he walks by. So I don't know what hit me, but Daniel Day-Lewis is walking by, and I slightly turned in to the left and bowed my head and turned back to the thing. All of a sudden I hear, cut. Martin Scorsese, little Martin, comes walking up to me and looks at me and goes, don't move. So Martin Scorsese and I are like this. We're buddies.
Okay.
We know each other well.
Don't move.
I know. Then the Tom Hanks movie, Philadelphia, I was a hospital orderly carrying towels. And the other actor in it was Antonio Banderas. He was Tom Hanks' partner in the movie. So Antonio would come up to me in between takes and ask me did you see the movie? Is there a good restaurant in town? Where can I go? So Antonio Banderas and I are like this. I tell people all the time. So I had some of that, but I really, in terms of my talents, I'm articulate. I can act. I've done enough of that, and I could have been very busy, and my hearing wouldn't have been a factor at all. So it's a big regret.
Right. Well, you also did some repertory theater work.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
You're welcome.
Again, in Philadelphia, there was a repertory theater, and they were doing some Moliere, which is wonderful comedy. And I got to play a character called Diafaru, who was kind of a geek and a funny character. And it was great. It's not something I would do a lot, but again, it was another acting opportunity, and I took it. One of the things that taught me the most, I was asked to do a Honda ad. And we haven't talked about my eyes and what happened to my eyes, but I have in this eye what's called a scleral shell. It's a big shell painted to look like this eye and just sits on my eye. It does not move. Even though my eyes move, it doesn't move. So I was called in to do a Honda commercial, and they told me, here's the thing. This woman is not getting any satisfaction. She goes to the beauty parlor and she walks out with a beehive. She goes on a dating service and she meets the ultimate geek. You're going to be the ultimate geek. And he goes, what you have to do is you're going to turn around and she's going to tap you on the shoulder. And when you turn around, you got to make her freak out. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Okay. So woman comes up, taps me on the shoulder. I turn around and I start rolling my eyes with this eye staying in one place. And she literally went, "Oh!" I hear cut, and I'm going, "I'll never do movies again." And the director came up to me and said, "How did you do that?"
Yeah.
I said, "Family secret, family secret." Well, I got the ad. I got nicely paid for it. And I learned, never count yourself out. And sometimes your biggest edge is your biggest asset. So in this particular thing, my biggest challenge was my biggest asset.
Yeah, it worked for you. It worked.
Yes.
That's wonderful. That's a great story. That's a great story.
Yeah, well, I tell it all the time. It was a great lesson to me.
Yes. I was going to ask you, what kind of work have you done for radio?
Before 2002, yes, it was 1990s. After all the work that I did in the natural foods business, include write songs about foods, which never recorded. I would sing them a cappella for people. I used to do a lot of workshops for supermarkets and natural food stores who wanted to teach their customers about foods. Now, I worked for a natural food company that sold traditional Japanese foods, miso, tamari, soba noodles, all kinds of unusual stuff. So the only way that I could think of to get people to become more aware of these was to do something humorous. So I wrote songs about them, about seaweed and about tamari. And I'm forgetting the question.
Oh, working for radio.
Working for radio. So I realized, the story of my life is about where can I find a platform to do what I do.
Yeah.
First it was music, then it was some acting. Where can I find a platform now that I can't do anything? I can speak. So I was doing a lot of speaking around the East Coast and in other parts of the country. And I had a program with Penn State University for a while that I worked on. But I decided to do a series of commentaries for the radio. And they would be 2 minute. They'd be 2 minute commentaries on things that I knew about food. So for instance, one of my most popular ones was ketchup as a vegetable. And it was all about the fact that during Ronald Reagan's time, the Department of Nutrition, in trying to make sure the kids got everything they needed, was going to make ketchup a vegetable because it was tomatoes. So I wrote a humorous piece about ketchup as a vegetable. I wrote about tofu. I wrote about unusual things. I went into a studio with a friend of mine and recorded 2 minute commentaries and then sold them to natural food stores that they could use with their advertisements. So the natural food store would say, we're going to advertise a special this week and we're going to kick it off with Stu's commentary. So I wrote 33 commentaries for radio and sold them all, not much money at all. And so I had my voice around the country for a while, and that was it. So it was, again, another platform for me to do what I do, which is speak, write, sing, talk. And so it worked out well. It was fun, but it didn't have any future. So I stopped doing it. It was after that I moved to Rhode Island and started working with farmers.
Okay, farmers. And you also were involved in hosting and narrating educational, motivational, and training workshops.
I became known as somebody who could make sense out of a lot of unusual things. So at one point, the Mid-Continental Food and Drug Administration organization hired me to do a couple of presentations about foods that I knew and foods that I knew something about, and to really talk with Food and Drug Administration officials who didn't know much about esoteric natural foods or Japanese foods. And I used that as the pretext to kind of get us together. Okay, you're FDA officials, I'm on the other side here. Let's talk about these foods. And I would come up with humorous presentations. I would dress up as the entire food system and then talk about the role that the food system had to play. and how important the FDA was in making sure the food system could do what it needed to do. And again, wrote songs, and it was a wonderful thing and a wonderful time. I remember it. Again, didn't pay a lot of money. I couldn't do it. It was a nice platform, but it wasn't like I was speaking for the FDA every other week and making some money. So
we'll talk about, again, what happened in 2015, the journey back to your passion. What happened?
Well, in 2013, I discovered a gentleman in Boston by the name of Jeffrey Plant, who was an auditory trainer and worked with people with hearing loss to help them regain functioning. And Jeff and I started working together, and I love the guy. He was a very wily Australian. And we would do listening exercises, because his idea was hearing and listening are two entirely different things. If you hear well, you don't have to listen. But if you don't hear well, you have to learn how to listen all over again. And the more I worked with him and the more I learned how to listen, the better my speech comprehension became. And I was starting to hear musical tones more correctly. So there was something to that listening that really made that happen. By 2015, I was feeling a little cocky. And I thought, maybe I can do music again. So Jeff agreed that I was getting close. So in 2015, I put a Kickstarter campaign together to help finance a journey back. And it would involve trying to record 2 more songs. It would also help me get some technology that I needed. A company called Sensophonics in Chicago had developed a hearing aid to wear in the recording studio. And with the hearing aid, I could attach myself to the console and get the music direct to my ear rather than have to get it through the speakers. So I had equipment. I had songs that I wanted to record, 2 more songs that nobody's heard, and gave it a chance. But before I did that, I decided I need to do this live. I need to record again. Once again, I wanted a platform. And I had a friend in Providence, and I asked her, would you host a living room concert? I will come in with my keyboard, and I will sing songs for an hour and a half. And just as a practice, let me get back out there doing that. She said, sure, absolutely. So she invited about 20 people that I knew and friends. And I did an hour and a half concert, and I sang off key the entire 90 minutes.
Okay.
Imagine sitting there and I'm singing off key for 90 minutes, thinking I'm killing this audience, not knowing that I was killing this audience.
You were killing.
Literally. So much for that platform.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. Now, the problem was I had another concert to do a week hence.
Yeah. Okay.
And I had a friend who owned a coffee house. The coffee house is filled. Same thing happened. Bam, 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 bam. Singing. They loved my patois. I was very funny. I had a wonderful gig. And but something did happen that was good. And at halftime, I walked out into the patio, and a friend of mine came up to me and said, I love your singing. Do you know you're singing a half tone to a full tone sharp? I said, oh, Jesus, no, I didn't know that. So I went back in and I apologized to everybody. And I said, thank you for not leaving. And I finished up off key, and people came up to me afterwards and said, don't quit. You're doing great. Keep going, everything. So everybody was very positive. I was totally devastated. But it was then that I learned what a music program on my hearing aid did. I had had a music program on my hearing aid for a couple of years. I thought it was for listening to music. What my music program did for me, and let's say I have a button on the hearing aid. It goes once, twice, 3, 4 times, and back to 1. Okay. The third program, the music program, gives me a flat response. Oops, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's all right. Let's get this back here.
All right.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. gives me a flat response, meaning when the hearing aid is in speech mode, it fixes my hearing to accommodate my hearing loss. But what it does is it changes some tones so I can understand speech. But if I'm in speech mode in the hearing aid, when I sing, I'm a half to a full note sharp. So right after this devastating set of concerts, I tweaked my hearing aid into the speech mode, and suddenly I was singing in key. From that moment on, I have been able to sing in key with the hearing aid in the speech mode.
Yes, yes.
And that was 2015.
Okay.
So that was some 30 plus years after I lost my hearing.
Right. Well, you know, what I wanted to ask you was, your voice in speaking hasn't suffered. You know, people that are deaf, let's say, they can't hear, you know, they can't speak. They can't really talk right, you know. But in those 4 years there, your speech hasn't suffered. You still speak real well. It didn't affect that.
I worked very hard on speaking well.
Okay.
I always have, and part of it was because I couldn't hear myself.
Yeah.
And I have a relatively new hearing aid right now, and the old hearing aid I have is very similar to this, but I don't hear as well in the old as I do now because technology is changing. And one of the mishaps of people who lose their hearing is they stop listening to themselves, or and when they do, they don't hear what they're doing, speaking.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people with hearing loss that don't speak well, and some of them have such a great hearing loss that they can't hear what they're doing. I can hear well enough, so I work on that. And then singing, a lot of singing is articulation. It's not just, you know, letting it go. It's articulation. And I was listening to Morgan Freeman speak recently, and Morgan, with this wonderful voice, he said he took speech lessons in college, and that the teachers that he had really worked with him because he had such a wonderful voice. But you don't need to lose your voice when you lose your hearing, but you need to work at that. It's like if you want to hear again, you have to listen.
Right. Good point. Good point. Well, also in 2015, you repackaged and released your first album on CD entitled Deja S2.
Greg, do that again. What's it called?
Deja S2. Is that right?
Say
Stu
S
two.
and 2. Say S and 2 quickly.
Stu.
Yes. Yes.
Stu.
All right.
Okay,
We've convinced another fan.
I got it. I got it.
I have
now.
to tell you. Everybody says the same thing you do.
Okay. S2.
And I go,
okay.
I thought it was so damn clever to say Deja Stu.
Stu.
Now everybody's going Deja S2.
You know,
what the hell is that?
You know, I should have thought through that. I should have looked at that more closely. I really should have. As Stu. I get it. Stu. Very good. I like it. I like that.
Sounds like a space program.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, you got
it's my name. It's my name.
Yeah, you stumped me. You stumped me, Stu.
Now, what we did is my first album came out before CDs. And I have a friend who's a graphic artist, and I decided, you know, in 2015 came along. This is part of the Kickstarter program. I wanted to be able to repackage the album. So I did repackage the album. It was mastered onto a CD through CD Baby, and then put out on Pandora, whatever it is out there, Spotify, Apple, and it was out there. And I sold some, but not a lot. But it's the same music. So I think a lot of people thought it was the new album. But in Deja Stu, how clever is that? How clever is that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, nobody knows what the hell it meant, but it's pretty clever.
Well, you know, I mean, if I had just looked at it a little more carefully, I would have gotten that. If I would have. All right.
I know.
You stumped a lot of people with that. I tell you. Okay. It's so obvious now. It's one of those things. Once you know, it's so obvious. Well, you after you played some live shows.
Can I play for? What was the question?
Oh, after this was released, you played some live shows.
Okay, let me think. Yes, I belong to an organization called the American Association of Musicians with Hearing Loss. And each year there is a national convention in Washington, D.C. and St. Louis and other things. And the association got some time at the convention to put on a concert with musicians with hearing loss. So there are some wonderful musicians and friends of mine who play classical music, classical guitar, who sing. And so I was one of the artists that performed at these events, Washington, D.C., Rochester, New York. And then in Salt Lake City in 2018, I played piano for one of the queens of the hearing loss community, Gail Hannon, who was doing a one-woman show speaking, and I was playing the piano behind her. Now, again, to show you what happens, for Gail and I to be in contact, she would be on the stage looking out into the audience, and I'd be behind the piano. But we needed to be able to communicate. So there's a new technology, or a fabulous technology called hearing loops. And it's a magnetic coil that goes on the floor or on the ceiling, wherever it is, that allows you to use your hearing aid and something called a T-coil, which is one of the programs, to connect to the magnet on the floor and be able to hear. I could sit in the back of a room and somebody could be speaking up top, and because of the loop, I would hear everything that person says.
Okay.
So it's not Bluetooth, but it's called a hearing loop, hearing induction loop. So
okay. Where can I get one of those? Where can I get one of those? I'm being silly.
I will share some. The woman that does most of the placements is Juliet Sturkins, and I can get you her information. And you can find out now. Churches are doing this.
Okay.
Schools are doing this. Colleges are doing this. It's really a wonderful thing.
Okay.
And, I will share that information with you.
Okay. Okay. I was kind of being facetious. I was being a little facetious, but half serious about that.
No,
that would be
great.
Nice. I mean, that would be nice.
Great.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
It's going to cost you a lot of money for my information, but I'll be happy to give it to you.
Okay.
So induction loops. So I would play for these concerts, and then I played background music for Gail. And what's happened with Gail in Salt Lake City in 2018 is that we rehearsed. We did one rehearsal before the show, and it didn't work, and we couldn't hear each other, and it was disaster. And they brought in the king of hearing loops, who said, "Give me an hour." We gave him an hour. We came back, and we heard everything just perfectly. So she and I could communicate. I played some Beatles stuff and other stuff, which was the background for her one-woman presentation, and it worked out great. So lots of good things are happening for people with hearing loss that have nothing to do with hearing aids specifically, but all the technology that's been built up around them. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. We'll talk some about the great work that you've been doing as a hearing activist.
Once again, I needed a platform. And ever since the Association of Adult Musicians with Hearing Loss made itself known to me, which was a while ago, I've been very invested in attending functions and being active on their Facebook page. My sweetheart and I did a workshop for the association about my hearing loss and how we got that back. My sweetheart and I have also written a screenplay about my story and our story, not only my music story, but how we met in 2017 online, and how me trying to get my hearing back and us having a love relationship It's a beautiful story. People heard about it and said, you need to write a screenplay. We have. And we've been getting it around, and we're trying to sell the screenplay. And if anybody who's listening here wants to look at the screenplay, we'd be happy to send it to them. But so that's part of the activism as well, is turning my entertainment platforms into an educational platforms as well.
Yes, yes. Very good work. Very good that you're doing
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Yes. And you also mentioned you've been working on a memoir.
A year ago, my idol, Gordon Lightfoot, died. And I wasn't aware of it, but I started receiving condolence letters and notices from friends and fans, music fans, which I still have a lot of, music fans and Facebook friends. So sorry to hear about this. I know how much he meant to you. And he did mean that to me. In 1975, I got a chance to perform with him down at Princeton University, of all places. And he's just been a constant in my life. I met him again in 2010 when he came up to Providence to perform, and just his life, his lifestyle, his history, his narrative, all touched me. So I wrote a little tribute to him and talked about how important he was in my life. And people were very intrigued and wanted to know how are you friends with him? You didn't know him, did you? And I said, no, we really didn't know each other. We met twice. I performed on a stage with him once. And I started writing, and I realized I was writing part of my story. That I looked at the parallels between his upbringing and his moving into the music business with my own. His mother was very important, as was mine. He started playing when he was very young. When he was 14, as did I, he got his first guitar, and all the things that were there. So I decided I'm going to write a few more installments to talk about the links between Gordon Lightfoot's life and work and my own. And the more that I did, the more I realized I was telling my story. And I rolled off 16 installments and decided after the 16 installments, the last one, up to the moment that I lost my hearing, I realized there was a second part of my story. And that's what I'm working on right now. I'm writing more installments, and they're going to become a book. And it's a memoir of my life in and out of music. And I can thank Gordon Lightfoot for kind of triggering that, but he was very inspirational to me in many ways. Just a quick fun story. I performed with him in 1975. In 2010, I met him after his show in Providence, Rhode Island. And I thought it would be natural for me to say, Gordon, I opened 2 shows for you at Princeton University 35 years ago, and he would be very appreciative, I thought. Instead, I said, Gordon, I opened 2 shows for you at Princeton University 35 years ago. And his comment was, that's a long time ago, man. So I said, yeah, I guess so. The person I was with, Don Palouse, was a well-known engineer at Columbia Records. And Columbia Records in New York City has a studio called the Cathedral. And what it is it's an old church with incredible acoustics where they now do a lot of recording. So Don stepped up to say, Gordon, I used to work for CBS. Did you ever record in the Cathedral? And thinking that he'd probably go, yes, of course. He said, I've been in a lot of cathedrals, man. So that was pretty much it. Years later, I read a biography by Nick Jennings about Gordon Lightfoot. And sure enough, back in the late 60s, his manager, Albert Grossman, brought him down to New York to record in the Cathedral. And
he did.
That's one for you, Gordon. I know.
He's been in a lot of cathedrals.
As you can tell, I have all these great stories about music. So while I'm not making music right now, my life is still there. I still have the number 35 all-time rock classic song at KSAG in St. Louis, which is one of the Midwest's biggest channels. So, and then VIP magazine in 2014 and this and that.
Right.
And yet I should have been an actor.
Right. Oh man, that's fun. That's fun.
I know.
You've had a very full life too, and enjoyable. and you can look back on it and say, you can see where you've come from and where you are now, and 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 you've reached a lot of people, and
Well,
with coming out with this new material, what you said, a couple of months or so, that will be nice too. This people have never heard before.
You're absolutely right, and thank you. Writing about my story has been very intriguing and very emotionally gratifying.
Yeah.
Though I told my sweetheart the other day, I'm about to go into a very difficult period in my writing, and it's going to hurt. And we didn't talk about my eyes, but 2 years after my hearing went, I lost the retinas in both of my eyes, and had to have general surgery and laser surgery. And my eyes have been an issue for me my entire life. But it's almost too dark to talk about it after I've been talking about my hearing and what I lost. But it's also part of my narrative.
Yeah.
And telling my story has, I'm not going to say it's helped me reconcile anything. No, it hasn't. It's reminded me of what I had to do to continue to survive.
Right.
And all the people that were involved in helping me survive.
Right.
And yet my piano is right here, my baby grand. I could sit down right now and reel off a bunch of songs in key. And yet getting back into the studio and trying to do all that right now, I'm 75 and I'm tired. And I don't know whether I want to get back into that again, but I may sit here with a tape recorder, reel off a couple of songs, but I have about 10 or 15 songs that nobody's ever heard that they will hear pretty soon.
Right. I know a lot of people out there are eager to hear that, but you have, you have been through a whole lot in your life too. And, dealing with that, the hearing loss and the retinas in the eyes, it just shows that you have a lot of inner strength as well, and you also had people along the way, like you said, to help you. So that's great. That's wonderful,
Well, yeah, I think, that's what it's reminding me of.
Yeah.
And getting me back in touch with these people, because I spend so much of my time just holding on.
Right.
And hoping that things wouldn't get worse, only to watch them get worse at times. And that was difficult. So I was thankful I had people to lean on during that time. And my sweetheart now, it's just, I'm thankful and grateful.
Yes. Well, it's I imagine the memoir has been a bit of a cathartic time for you too. Yeah,
That's the word. That's the word. Yes, it is. And also, it's interesting when you're writing, your memory has to cough up so much stuff. Yeah. And I've written almost 40,000 words, and part of me said, where did that stuff come from?
Yeah.
I'm sure some of it is not absolutely correct, but the spirit of it is. And the comments I've been getting about it says it's touching other people because they're kind of getting in touch with themselves as well.
Right.
And so that's fine. But I love writing. It's my platform now, and I'm happy to continue doing it. And I'm hoping in 5 or 6 months to have the book.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. So.
Well, that will be wonderful to share with people. Exactly.
That's right.
Yes. Well, you keep passing it on. I mean, through your words, through your music, you keep touching people, and that's what it's all about, So, yeah, I do appreciate this, Stu. It's been very easy talking to you, very easy listening to you. Speaking of listening, it's been very, very easy. You're easy to talk to. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, Greg. It's been, and I would say likewise. I'm very grateful that you found me in the bushes and and brought me out, because I'm my favorite topic. You gave me a chance to talk about me again, which is my favorite topic. So, thank you. And it also, it also makes all that stuff in the past worth it. Right.
There you go. It does. It's all a culmination of where you are, where you've become, where you are right now.
Exactly.
And
I wish you good luck with your programming. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're trying to do, and are succeeding in doing.
Yeah. Well, I would love to bring the world together, through music. Remember that song, I'd love to. It was the Coca-Cola theme. Talk about themes. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Yep. So that's kind of where my heart is, you know, and
There are a lot
reaching
of
out to
metaphors
his.
for that.
That's
There are a
right.
lot of
That's right.
metaphors for that. You're right.
There
You're right.
really is, and like to bring people together and just share. It's a nice thing, you know, to hear your stories and to share with people and just to hear their recollections and maybe memories of you and things like that. And like you said, you know, even
That's
with
right.
like, yeah, with all of those people and with Gordon Lightfoot, like you said, you know, you remember him and people remember you as well, you know. And so, well, that's good. Two things to look forward to: the new music and the memoir. Great, great.
I agree.
Yeah.
And thank you for, and when I'm got the music and everything else is there, you'll be one
Yeah.
of the first people to get it so you can share it.
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much, Stu. Thank you so much again. All the best to you, okay?
And
And
to you.
and I will stay in touch and I will send you a copy of this usually a week or so and
I
get it
look forward
edited,
to it.
and then you can share it with people too and see what kind of
Yes.
responses we get. All right, Stu, it's been
Thank you,
very
Greg.
nice.
Thank you
Very
very much.
enjoyable. All right. You're welcome. Very welcome. Bye-bye for now, okay? All right. All the best to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.